The Rangers' three best relievers from last season are all free agents, so Texas is going to have to rebuild their bullpen, and even though they want to spend some on the free agent market, they're really going to need some internal guys to step up. We're talking about who that could be next year, and all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Patrick, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 11 seasons, including all 6 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Patrick. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the internal candidates for the Rangers, why it's so important to develop some homegrown relievers and a little bit more, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Now, the Rangers had 2 exceptional relievers last season. One okay reliever as their 7th inning option in Jose Leclerc. Their 9th inning option in Kirby Yates is a free agent. David Robertson officially declining that mutual option makes him a free agent. So the Rangers in the back end of their pen have quite a bit of turnover, or hopefully not, should they bring back Kirby Yates and David Robertson and maybe even Jose Leclerc. But it seems unlikely that all 3 of those guys are coming back. And even though you have Josh Sborz sitting there, who didn't give the Rangers a lot this year because of his health, they're hoping that he will provide them a little bit more next season. Texas is going to need some internal candidates to step up and play a big role in the back end of their pen. Whether that's an internal option to become the Rangers closer next year, whether that's an internal option, a prospect, or someone else that is already on this roster, mostly prospects is who's going to be on this list, mostly guys who haven't made their Major League debut. One of those guys is going to have to step up and carry some significant late innings if the Rangers want to contend in 2025. There is clearly a limited budget, and spending big on relievers is not something that usually works out particularly well. I mean, we saw that for the first half of the season with Josh Hader in Houston last season. I'm hoping that that becomes a trend, and that Josh Hader is just not good for the Astros, and mainly for my own personal reasons. But still, even if the Rangers do bring back Yates and Robertson, I don't think bringing back all 3 is an option. Obviously, Sborz has had some questions about his health and his durability. I mean, even during the regular season in 2023, he was not very dependable. He'd have some spurts where he was absolutely untouchable, and then he'd be bad, and then he'd get hurt, and then repeat and repeat and repeat the cycle. Thankfully for the Rangers, in October, he was on the longest hot streak of his life, the best hot streak of his life. But I don't know that the Rangers can count on that all year in 2025. And even if they can, there's going to need to be some homegrown relievers, not just for this year, but for the long-term sustainability of this club being successful. Buying new relievers year over and over and over again, while Chris Young has done a good job of getting those guys in, especially last year. I mean, the hit rate he had on the guys that he did bring in last year was pretty darn good. Getting Yates on that kind of a deal with that level of production, insane. Jose Urena, very, very under the radar signing. David Robertson, exceptional signing. But the Rangers just haven't been able to home grow relievers, good relievers. They've been able to home grow some fine relievers. But I think that this team that has done such a poor job of developing pitching in general, just in general, not even getting into specifically the starting pitching. But I think that more of an indictment on this team that they haven't been able to home grow even really barely any elite back-end relievers. It's hard for anybody to home grow starting pitching. That is a near impossible task. There's like 3 to 5 teams in the league who can really do it at all. But most teams, even the Tigers and the Pirates and the teams that are just have been habitually down towards the bottom. The Tigers, it seems, less less of a slight to call them the mid team with the run that they went on this year, but still they have been able to develop quite a few pretty darn good relief options. We saw their pitching chaos, but the Rangers have not been able to turn those failed starters, those guys who weren't quite good enough to start, into very, very good leverage relievers. That's what a lot of teams can do. The Rangers haven't been able to home grow starting pitching. It seems like they're starting to turn that around with the likes of Kumar Rocker, with Cody Bradford as well. But still, they haven't been able to turn those guys who couldn't quite make it as starters, guys we've turned into elite relievers. We've seen that with guys like Liam Hicks, who was a starter for quite a long time, became a very, very elite reliever. And we saw it this year in Luke Weaver, who had been a bad starter for 7 years and turned out to be the Yankees' best late relief option, their closer down the stretch and through the playoffs to the World Series. And they didn't win the World Series, but it wasn't Luke Weaver's fault. But Jose Leclerc is really the only guy who the Rangers have had that has been homegrown and been a starting pitcher and not quite worked out and been a good late leverage reliever. Whatever your qualms are with Jose Leclerc, he has been pretty darn good and at least so much better than the other options. So let's look at 6 different candidates to help the Rangers bullpen next year as late leverage relief options that are already on this roster. Number 1 option, I think, is Emiliano Teodo. Now, this is not to say that I have given up on Teodo as a starter. This was a huge breakout year for Teodo. Of the guys in the Rangers farm, there are very few that had a better season, a more productive season, a more eye-opening season to the potential possibilities, ceiling boosting season than Emiliano Teodo. He finished the year with a sub-2 ERA. He's pitched in 20 games. 19 of those were starts, 86 and a third innings, 50 walks, not ideal, but 110 strikeouts, 11 and a half Ks per 9. And what's crazy is that is the lowest Ks per 9 of his career. But this guy, when he is in the zone, when he is throwing strikes, he is absolutely unhittable. His arsenal is a 100-ish mile-an-hour fastball, more of a two-seamer now. Doesn't get as much swing and miss, but isn't as just arrow straight as his four-seam fastball was. He's also got a changeup that is fine. If it becomes average, then I think he's definitely sticking as a starter, most likely because he cannot stop walking the world. He is going to end up as a reliever. But the slurve, the breaking ball, it is kind of rocker-ish in that it's not quite a curve. It's not quite a slider. It's just its own thing. But he throws that anywhere from the low 80s to as fast as 90 miles an hour. It has got incredible break. He has got an exceptional feel for it. It gets such great swing and miss. And it's honestly better than his fastball. His fastball that has been clocked as high as 102 miles an hour routinely sits in the upper 90s, routinely touches 100 miles an hour. This is a guy who, if he does move out of the starting rotation, if the Rangers are not confident in his ability to stick as a starter long-term, which I fear is going to be the case because when you have a career walks per 9 in 4 minor league seasons of 5 walks per 9, it's hard to stick as a starting pitcher. He's got the ability to do so, but if he does not stick as a starter, this is a guy who I believe from the jump, from day one, could make the Rangers pen out of camp and not just make the Rangers big league roster, but could provide a meaningful impact in the back end of that pen. He has got exceptional swing and miss stuff that is good enough to get big leaguers out right now. He's got a lot of confidence in himself, and though he has been a starter for the vast majority of his minor league career, the moment that really kind of turned me on him of thinking, okay, this is a really, really special guy as opposed to a guy who doesn't really know how to find the zone, doesn't know how to stay in the zone, got great stuff, but is just too wild to be effective. The thing that changed my mind on that was it started in Surprise last year. When he was in the Arizona Fall League, he was the best pitcher in the Arizona Fall League. He was pitching out of the pen, didn't allow a single earned run, 8 games, 11 innings, 3 walks, 19 strikeouts. No earned runs, just 3 hits allowed. This guy was absolutely untouchable, and everybody was buzzing about him, saying, okay, well, Rangers are going to throw this guy in the back end of their pen, and, he's going to make the team out of camp next year. No, Rangers stuck with him as a starter. He had a fantastic season as a starter, a little bit rougher down the stretch, but he was just so darn consistent in the couple of starts where I got to see him when he's in the strike zone. This guy is absolutely unhittable. If he does end up sticking as a starter, that is fantastic. That is a huge developmental win. Developing every single starting pitcher the Rangers can is a great, great thing. But should he move to the pen, this is a guy who could help this Rangers pen right now, and I think would be absolutely electric back there. Coming up, we'll talk about another Rangers reliever, one who made his major league debut, and another guy who is on the Rangers roster who you might have forgotten about right after this. This show is brought to you by Hims. Guys, sometimes intimate moments happen spontaneously, and we always want to be ready so we can perform in the bedroom. Hims provides access to treatments that can help you stay hard and last longer, giving you that boost of that confidence so you can be ready whenever the mood strikes. Hims is changing men's healthcare by providing you with access to affordable sexual health treatments from the comfort of your couch. The process is 100% online, so there's no need for uncomfortable doctor's visits. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option. If prescribed, your medication ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/lockedon. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options. hims.com/lockedon. The products mentioned are chewable compound products which are not approved by or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan. Now, the next guy I think could help the Rangers in the back end of their pen is a guy who made his big league debut one whole inning last year, a guy who I thought was going to make the team out of camp. That is Marc Church. This guy has the nastiest slider in the Rangers farm system, mainly because Kumar Rocker graduated and also because his breaking ball is not really a slider. Technically, it's slider-esque. And, it is just absolutely fantastic. This is a guy who surprised the world with how effective he was in spring training. I mean, Marc Church was the talk in spring training this year. The fastball is pretty good. Sits up there all the way up to 97. I don't believe he's touched triple digits yet, but sits routinely in the mid 90s. But that slider is just absolutely wipeout, dominating. Absolutely exceptional. He pitched a little bit this year in the minor leagues, but just missed most of the season due to injury. Pitched a little bit in Round Rock, 17 games there, 22 1/3 innings, a 3.22 ERA. Pitched a couple of games rehabbing in Hickory with the Sally League, 3 games there, a 10.80 ERA, not exactly fully healthy. So those stats aren't super telling of his effectiveness in general. The Rangers also had him pitch in the Arizona Fall League because he missed most of the season. They want to get him some reps in there, wanted him to get some innings, but he wasn't particularly sharp. Three earned runs given up, 1 home run in 5 innings of work, also struck out 8, a 5.40 ERA. But the one appearance in the big leagues on the final day of the season, 1 inning, 1 hit, no walks, 1 strikeout, 0 runs allowed. A nice debut for Church, who I thought would be pitching much more in this Rangers pen that could have used a little bit more help of some 6th, 7th inning guys, some depth options in the Rangers pen. But Church, I think, is good enough to not only make the Rangers pen out of camp, I think that is almost very likely that he makes the Rangers pen out of camp next year. I don't know if he's going to make it as, immediately out of the gates as a 7th, 8th inning leverage reliever guy. It depends on how many guys the Rangers sign in free agency. If they bring back Yates and Robertson, obviously those roles are locked up. If they don't sign anybody else, then I think Spores is pretty much guaranteed to get the highest leverage relief role that is left after free agent additions, if those free agent additions are just their own guys that they are bringing back, or some other really, really great reliever that the Rangers might sign. I don't think the Rangers are going to prioritize that many, high value targeted free agents in the pen. So that's why these guys are so darn important. Why guys like Marc Church are so darn important. Next guy on this list is not a failed starter, not even a potential failed starter. Church has also always been a reliever, but this guy is Skylar Hales, a guy who the Rangers drafted in the 4th round. One of the first relievers drafted in that draft back, I believe it was 2023. This was a fantastic season for Skylar Hales, his 2nd professional season of pitching. Spent time in Hickory, spent time in Frisco, most of his season actually in Frisco, and in Frisco is where he absolutely dominated. A 2.10 ERA in 30 innings, 31 strikeouts, just 8 walks. This is a guy who lives in the strike zone and has one of the best fastballs in the Rangers minor league system. He's not sitting 105 or anything with it. Usually he's sitting more 94 to 97, does touch triple digits. It's also got a slider that's in the mid 80s. That's fine. But the deception, the arm slot that he brings that fastball out of, and not just that, but the command. I mean, the shape of the fastball, the deception and location, all of those combined, since it's, usually sitting mid to upper 90s and not, 97 to 100, he can still get up there when he needs it. But the fact that he combines all the things that you like in a fastball with the shape, with the spin on it, with the location and the deception as well, that's what makes him so gosh darn effective. I mean, they call him Clark Kent. The nickname is Clark Kent in the Rough Riders pen because he literally looks like Superman. I mean, the dude is absolutely jacked. This is a very, very handsome man, listed at 6'4", 220 pounds. I say that as an objective journalist. This is a good looking dude, and his fastball looks even freaking better. I'm surprised that he didn't get a bump up to AAA with how much success he was seeing in Frisco. He did spend some time in the Arizona Fall League where he got rocked up a little bit in 5 games, 3 2/3 innings, a 17.18 ERA. Yeah, a 17.18 ERA. Not the strongest showing from him. Did not give up any home runs in those 3 2/3 innings. Did walk a couple. Only got 2 strikeouts in 1 out shy of 4 innings. But this is a guy who has been consistent in his ability to strike out batters, to locate his fastball, and having a reliever with elite stuff that doesn't walk a whole bunch of guys. Almost always it feels like with those starters turned relievers, those failed starters turned relievers, it's because they just walked too many guys. They couldn't stay in the zone. They were not economical enough with their pitch count to go deep into games, to go through the order as many times as you would like for a starting pitcher. So that's why they end up in the pen. And if you have a reliever who doesn't walk a whole bunch of guys, I mean, that is just such a comforting feeling, because I feel like that happens with even the best relief options. I mean, heck, even with Kirby Yates this year, that was the only thing that he didn't do exceptionally well. Yates was walking a decent number of guys, but Yates, it's the one thing that separates Yates's season now from being his absolute best. Because back when Yates was at his peak in 2018, 2019, he wasn't walking guys. That's a rarity with a reliever. That's why Skylar Hales is that kind of rarity. And the slider is in the mid 80s. It can get some swing and miss. He didn't have as much swing and miss as I would really like for him to see at Frisco. Only 9.3 Ks per 9 in Frisco. And even though he gave up a few more runs in Hickory, a 4.39 ERA, he did have 11.8 Ks per 9 in 20 games down in high A Hickory. This year, maybe he ends up starting the season with AAA Round Rock, but I wouldn't be surprised if he made the pen out of camp. I think they'd probably like to get him a little bit of seasoning in AAA, but in terms of just prospects in general, this guy has always been a reliever, and relievers are always the fastest ones to the big leagues. Once they figure things out, usually there's not that much refinement at the minor league level. We saw that with guys like Pete Fairbanks. Pete Fairbanks is the guy who came back from Tommy John surgery and started absolutely shoving in Hickory and just jumped 4 levels in 1 year all the way to the big leagues. And then the Rangers thought they'd sell high on him. Not sure if that would sustain, and got themselves a Nick Solak. And well, we know how that trade worked out. Not super well in the Rangers' favor. But coming up, we got 3 more guys on this list, including one you might have forgotten about, and including another one. You may be thinking, Bryce, this guy needs to be a starter. But if he isn't, he might be an absolutely dynamite reliever. We'll talk about all that right after this word from our sponsors. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live by play, and so much more in the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Now, the next guy on this list is the one that you may have forgotten about. His name is Carson Coleman. You're thinking, who the heck is Carson Coleman? Well, he was the Rangers' Rule 5 pick heading into last season. He was drafted out of the University of Kentucky by the Rays back in the 33rd round of the 2019 MLB draft. He did not pitch at all in 2024. He also didn't pitch at all in 2023. He spent time with the Yankees after being drafted by the Rays. He was ended up traded there. But he's missed all of 2023 and 24 coming back from Tommy John surgery. The Rangers thought that he might pitch on their big league roster in 2024, but an injury setback when he was on his rehab set him back, and he was not able to pitch last year. So he stays in the Rangers system. I'm not entirely sure if they'll get to keep holding on to him this year since he did not play, since he was injured. The Rangers got to hold on to him, but in the minor leagues, this guy was absolutely phenomenal. There is a reason the Rangers took a chance on him, gave up a 40-man spot for him in 2 seasons in the minors. Yes, only 2 seasons in the minors. He has 13.1 Ks per 9, a 3.5 ERA, and he did his best work in his last year of minor league ball. That was in 2022, spending time between High A Hudson Valley and Double A Somerset. He combined for a 2.13 ERA in 63 innings, 95 strikeouts. This guy has got dynamite stuff, and if the Rangers could get him healthy, I think he will end up playing a big role in the Rangers pen in 2025, hoping that he gets to stay healthy, hoping that the Rangers can keep him on their roster. This is a guy who was worth taking a flyer on when you have that kind of a pick in the Rule 5 draft, when you are in this cycle of contention. This is the kind of guy you take a flyer on. This is the kind of guy who is worth one of those 40-man spots, because if it works out, whoo boy, could it be very special. Next guy on this list is not a guy who is on the Rangers 40-man roster just yet. I think they might have to make a decision on him coming up here pretty soon, but this is Dane Acker, number 5 guy on my list that could impact the Rangers pen next year as a late leverage relief option. He was acquired by the Rangers in, I believe it was the Jonah Heim trade. He was acquired in a trade with the Oakland A's, spent time at Rice, spent some time at Oklahoma. He's a guy who had all the hype in the world, a Texas native, spent a little bit of time in Frisco in 2023, also some time in Hickory. This year, spent the entire season in Frisco, mostly a starter, but then towards the end of the year, he transitioned to a bullpen role, and he was downright unhittable as a reliever. He was pretty solid as a starter, too. A 3.32 ERA in 18 starts this year, 90 strikeouts in 84 innings, but then in relief, a 1.10 ERA, 9 games, 16 and a third innings, 16 strikeouts. So not just a 1 inning and done kind of guy. I think he could end up being more of a 1 and done inning kind of guy, especially if those strikeout numbers keep going up. He's a guy who has a more versatile option repertoire. That's the word I was looking for than a typical reliever. I mean, most really elite back-end relievers just have 2 pitches. They just kind of go with those 2. Some will go with a more refined approach of having 3, 4, 5 pitches sometimes. Usually that's more of the failed starter kind of guys, and that would be what Dane Acker would be. I'm not entirely sold on him As a starting pitcher, I think the Rangers have a lot better options in terms of guys with upside to start. But if the Rangers want to just straight up throw him in that back end of the pen kind of a role, see what they have there, I think there might be something there in Dane Acker. And the last guy on this list, of course, wouldn't be an episode talking about Rangers pitching prospects if I did not mention Jack Leiter. You may be saying, what the heck? Bryce, Jack Leiter needs to be a starter. You cannot have the number 2 overall pick be a reliever. Well, they might. The Rangers might. This is not an indication of me giving up on Jack Leiter as a starter. I still do believe that Leiter can be a starter. I still do believe that ceiling of number 2 starting pitcher, it's in there. But I think that this is more of a comment on Jack raising his floor than it is about his ability to achieve his ceiling. There are some real questions about Jack Leiter's progress as a starting pitcher the first couple years in the minor leagues in Frisco. It was a rough go, and Jack will be the first person to tell you that. But when he came back this year, after a couple weeks on the development list, and he started throwing harder, and he started getting more swing and miss, and he stopped missing glove side every single time with the fastball. Still, the command is not elite by any means. He is still prone to giving up some home runs when he gets too happy with sticking only with the fastball. His fastball is exceptional, truly an exceptional pitch. But when big leaguers know that's the only thing that's coming, they can just sit on that thing and crush it, no matter if it's 100 miles an hour with all the spin in the world, or you're throwing a 102 mile an hour cutter like Emmanuel Clase. The best hitters in baseball, if they know one pitch is coming, unless you're literally Mariano Rivera, they can crush it. And Leiter this season really did so much to raise both his ceiling and his floor, in my opinion, because at the end of last year, the end of 2023, there was some reason for a little bit of upside. After that stint on the development list, he did start to make some progress, did make his AAA debut, and it wasn't great in that, but he started making different kinds of mistakes. But with the progress that Jack has made this year, with the curveball being more of a factor, with him throwing some just truly nasty curveballs in the big leagues this year, including that one that he struck out Aaron Judge on, was his best curveball that I've ever seen him throw. That slider has made some progress. He's able to throw it for strikes a little bit more. And I do still think that long term, and still hope that in the long term, Leiter is going to be a starting pitcher. And I think even in the short term, the Rangers will need him to start some games this year. I think he will end up needing to pitch maybe 8 to 10 starts this year. But if that doesn't work out, if the Rangers say, you know what, we're not quite sure about you as a starter, or at least not for right now, we think you could be a reliever. This is a guy who has the ceiling of not just an okay reliever, not just an okay starter who didn't quite work out as a starter, but one of the nastiest relievers he could be, one of the nastier relievers in baseball, especially if he starts to get that velocity up. If he's just going out there in couple inning stints, I mean, the fastball sits up there in the mid 90s. If he can get it up there into the upper 90s, 100 range with the kind of spin that he has on it, with how incredibly well it plays up in the zone, and if he can get those hitters to respect the slider or the curveball, if he could just go be a 3-pitch pitcher, not have to worry about the changeup, not have to worry about the cutter. If he wants to throw those in there occasionally to throw hitters off, fine. But you won't be as reliant on that as a reliever. And if they can just trust a little bit, just have to respect a little bit of those breaking balls being thrown for strikes. I mean, just ratchet up that nastiness. I was talking with a scout that thinks that Jack Leiter could be Pete Fairbanks-like in terms of how nasty he could be as a reliever. I mean, that is a huge upgrade of the floor, because with where Jack was last year, the floor was, this guy's a quad A guy. This is a guy who is not quite good enough for the big leagues, but a little bit better than AAA starter. And that is a horrifying thing. That is not something that brings really much of any value to a big league team. There's a bunch of those guys that are not quite good enough to be consistent starters in a rotation of a big league team, but aren't quite, they're basically your long relief options. And if you're spending that kind of money that the Rangers were on a number 2 pick, the kind of hope, the kind of, organizational, whatever oomph you're putting behind a guy like Jack Leiter, which is probably a little bit more pressure than Leiter needed, but was always going to happen when you have a number 2 overall pick, and especially when he's got the kind of pedigree that he did. If he turned into that, that would be a huge developmental failure on the Rangers' part. If he does turn into just one of the nastier relievers in baseball as a number 2 overall pick, it's not ideal, but that is still a very, very valuable thing, and would be a sign of progress for Chris Young and this organization, of them showing that this is a legitimately good pitching development organization. That would be a huge, huge step forward in a way that a thing that this team really hasn't done, and a thing that teams need to do, because signing relievers in free agency to big contracts is very risky. Trading for relievers, especially at the deadline, that is very, very risky because relievers are inherently so volatile. You want to be able to develop them internally, and when they get good, if they are about to be free agents and you are not in your cycle of contention, you trade them off, get more prospects, and you thrive as an organization. But when you're trading for those guys at the deadline, those are some of the worst trades it usually ends up being. I mean, see the Aroldis Chapman trade of how much it cost to give him up. Rangers won the World Series, so net winning that trade. But there are all kinds of other different examples of trading for those high leverage relief guys at the deadline, and why that is such a dangerous thing, and why it's so freaking important for the Rangers, even if they do bring back Yates and Robertson, and heck, even if they bring back Leclerc too, there's going to need to be some internal options to step up for those guys, because maybe they do sign Yates and Robertson and they have down years. Maybe you have an injury to one of your late leverage relief guys, and so you need a bushel of guys, a barrel, bullpen full of guys that can all throw gas, get swings and misses, and be absolutely nasty. And if you can start developing them yourselves internally, that would be a huge, huge sign of progress that this organization most desperately needs if they're wanting to get back to the promised land, or at least the playoffs in 2025. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing. And until next time, don't forget to enjoy Texas Rangers baseball.